Muslims. Reach across the sectarian divide. Shiites, find a Sunni pen pal. Communicate with someone on the other side. Sunnis, do the same. And then, maybe, reach out, tentatively, to a Christian, or even, heaven forbid, a Jew. Because perhaps it is time for those who purport to be followers of God to act like it.
So hello everyone, once again from the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. I do appreciate how many of you don't have a sense of humor when I made that joke about how in communist countries everyone has to get the same haircut, in reference to me getting my haircut yesterday at a Vietnamese barber where they didn't give me what I asked for. Some of you guys just like seriously need to lighten up and maybe not take me so seriously all the time when I'm saying stuff like that. But anyway, today we are talking about Jordan Peterson again, but mainly something hilarious that has happened is that all his Muslim fans have turned on him for various reasons. Now, you guys remember that like message to Muslims video, and we're going to talk about that. But he also did something else, which has really angered them. And it is really, really refreshing to go on a Jordan Peterson Instagram post and every single comment, like literally every single comment, is his own fans hating on him. So all of that coming up for you today. Also, this is the last video I'm going to be recording before I turn 27 on Saturday. It's been like a really good year, I think, for my YouTube. Like 25 to 26 was, felt amazing. But 26 to 27 has been really good as well. This whole year has been really fun making these videos. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. I just kind of want to stop aging now. But I'm getting to that point where I'm just like, I'm going to be 30 soon, even though I feel like I haven't aged since I was 22. Also, one question as well. Did you guys think I was younger or older than the age that I am? Because I always get comments saying like, oh, I thought you were like 22 or 23, and other people thinking I'm in my 30s. Do I really look like I'm in my 30s? I don't think I do. But let me know down in the comments. And also, before we go any further, please like the video. And in the comments, I'm curious. I know I do have Muslim subscribers and stuff. Do you know anyone in your own life who's a Muslim and a Jordan Peterson fan? I'd be very, very curious to know like anyone's experience with this stuff. Also, check me out on social media at the Kavernacle on Twitter and on Instagram. Instagram is where I post all about my travels around Asia, which I also am doing on my Patreon page. I'm posting one exclusive Patreon-only video per month talking about the country I've been in for that month. The Northern Vietnam / Hanoi one is already up, so all patrons got access to that, and I'm going to record the one about Cambodia in a couple weeks, and then the one about Southern Vietnam and so on. So if you care about that stuff, please become a patron. Also, other benefits include getting access to the private patrons Discord server and getting my Nintendo Switch friend code. Also, check out the subreddit in the description and check out my second YouTube channel. So if you're here just for the Jordan Peterson stuff, please check out the timestamps to skip ahead. But I thought I'd start this little segment by talking about my own views of things like Islam, for example, because I spoke about this in the past, and I spoke about like dealing with personal racism and prejudice and stuff. And I've always said that I think growing up in my late teenage years, like 18, 19, I feel like I was influenced by new atheism in the way I viewed like Muslim peoples, because obviously I grew up where the media were feeding you a diet of like Islamophobia. And obviously as someone who loves history and politics, I used to watch footage of the wars in like Afghanistan and Iraq, even as like a young child. And I think that really affected my view of Muslims. And I was like one of those new atheist people who was like, yeah, all religions are bad, but there's something about Islam that makes it inherently worse than others. I wasn't like the worst person for that. I did like generally just hate all religion, and I still kind of do. But I did lean in that direction. It really took like 2014 and like the mask off like Islamophobia from people like Sam Harris and Bill Maher and stuff that really started me down a different path. And also I'm just a massive fan of just like Middle Eastern history, Middle Eastern politics, Islamic history. It's something I've been fascinated with pretty much my entire time in like education. Obviously doing a history degree, I looked at various things in the Middle East, Iran, Egypt, obviously Israel, Palestine, and I did my master's degree where I actually wrote about the first Gulf War as part of my master's thesis. So yeah, I absolutely love the history of regions dominated by the Islamic religion. And of course, I also love medieval history, so that goes hand in hand with various Islamic caliphates. And I've actually been reading more about the period just after Muhammad's death recently, because I felt that was a period I was a bit blind on. And it's absolutely fascinating. Like, I absolutely love his history. But when I read religious history, it only cements further in my mind how ridiculous religion is and how it's always a tool for political control. And the really interesting thing about Islam is how political it was from the onset. And when you read about like Constantine with Christianity, that makes you realize how Christianity has pretty much for its entire existence been a tool of empire and political control. And Islam is pretty much the same thing. As much as I find it interesting, I also find both of them ridiculous and tools for control of the populace. You know, you guys might be religious. Obviously, you probably disagree with my characterization, but that's the way I see it, especially someone who was, you know, raised Catholic my entire life. But again, absolutely love this history, find it so interesting. And I feel like I understand it far better than someone like Jordan Peterson does. And also to touch on this thing I was talking about earlier about like this characterization of Islam being far more conservative than other religions, I fundamentally don't agree with that either. I think why Islam has this reputation and why Muslims are more like visibly conservative is because a lot of Muslims grow up in poorer countries, and often these countries are very bad for freedom of speech and secular rights and stuff like that. But part of the problem is a lot of these countries are controlled by Western-backed dictators in the first place who create this environment where this religious conservatism is either helpful to keep them in power, or it's just a result of them running the country terribly and not allowing it to have like freedom of speech and freedom of ideas. Like Egypt is a good example because obviously Mubarak was anti-Muslim Brotherhood. And after the revolution, the Muslim Brotherhood actually got in power through an election, and then Sisi overthrew the government because they don't like Islamicism, but because of the conditions that the Sisi government and the Mubarak government create, that does lead to more Islamic conservatism being able to thrive, like the Muslim Brotherhood has always been able to thrive in this situation of like oppression and cracking down on them. But just the way it runs the country and just how authoritarian it is, I think pretty much makes it a more conservative country. But Egypt isn't even the worst example. Of course, you have Saudi Arabia, where the Saudi royal family has been backed by the Americans since the 1930s and is propped up by the Americans, who actually went into Saudi Arabia to defend it from Saddam Hussein in 1990. And of course, because of Saudi money, the US prop up one of the worst spreaders of conservative, fanatical Islam in the entire world for geopolitical reasons. So I think it's very hypocritical for Westerners to turn around and say, well, look how backward Muslims are, when a lot of the poverty that breeds this Islamicism is a result of either the US and the West propping up various dictators or colonial divide and rule, which creates countries like Pakistan, for example. Because when we break it down, Islamist insurgents look just like Joseph Kony, who's a Christian, right? And in America, generally American Muslims are more progressive than like hardcore American Christians. I think that just lends credence to my argument that it's the environment that religion is in that creates the version of this religion, whether it be conservative or more liberal and tolerant. And I think a blend of freedom of speech, obviously people's material needs being met, and good education are stuff that can really stop fundamentalism in its tracks. I just wanted to get that out of the way because I feel like a lot of people will still think, well, Islam is more backwards than Christianity, while ignoring all the context, and that actually plays into the stuff that Jordan Peterson has said about Islam and Muslims, because he views it in this way that somehow that Muslims are uniquely more like violent or prone to conflict than, you know, the great Judeo-Christian West. So Jordan Peterson having Muslim fans is probably not surprising when there are a lot of Muslim communities that are fairly conservative. And who does Jordan Peterson see as the enemy? Liberals, the leftists, Marxists, groups that religious fundamentalists or just religious conservatives in general, and even just religious people in general, don't really like, because communism has a reputation for being like this atheist ideology that wants to completely destroy like organized religion and stuff like that. So let's look at why some people like Jordan Peterson in Muslim communities and what he has done lately to really infuriate them. So I'm going to come back to this article a bit later because it deals with the whole backlash very well. So by Lydia Wilson for New Lines magazine, how Jordan Peterson ruined his image with Muslims. On a hot, humid July night in 2018, I flew into Beirut airport, grateful for the driver meeting me and his air-conditioned car, a young pious Shiite from the Lebanese south. He wouldn't shake my hand, but he was friendly, if earnest. As we drove down the airport road, we talked about his life in Lebanon, including his recent move to Beirut from his family's village, and his hopes for the future now he'd moved to the big city. But his next question surprised me. Have you heard of Canadian psychologist called Jordan Peterson? Following morning, I went to Anton, just one of the 10 bookshops in Hamra, the area where I was staying. It's a long shot, I began, but do you have a book by Jordan Peterson called There Was No Need for Me to Finish the Sentence? As the bookseller jumped in, 12 Rules for Life? No, we're always sold out, but we can order it for you, he said, and turning to his computer continued, it will take 2 to 3 days. How many do you sell, I asked. The bookseller checked his computer records. I'd say on average about 80 a month, he replied, adding that they were currently 2 on order. This is one bookshop in a very bookshop-rich city. So anonymously, a lot of Muslims contributed to this article talking about why they are fans of Jordan Peterson. An Emirati friend in her 50s said to me, he has helped a lot of people. This incredible man has flicked on a light to help me find meaning in my existence. History will remember this man as an absolute beacon of light in an otherwise dark time. The light bulb moment for me was listening to him on Rogan talk about responsibility and how useless self-pity was. I ran out and bought 12 Rules for Life the same day. It changed my life. So I think Jordan Peterson's self-help stuff, as bad as it is, probably does have some sort of like universal appeal. But also I think his conservatism is probably also appealing to a lot of people, especially when he talks about like woke ideology, the LGBT community, and just like neo-Marxists. I guess that resonates with a lot of like religious communities and people who fundamentally don't like leftism because they see it as an attack on traditional values. But don't worry, although he does have a lot of Muslim fans, he's done lots to annoy them lately, and namely, like I said, he went to Israel and had dinner with Netanyahu. So let's get into the very, very satisfying backlash to this. So Times of Israel reporting, Jordan Peterson, lightning rod of the US culture wars, receives warm embrace in Israel. Peterson, who in recent months has seemed to gain an interest in Israel, interviewing on his podcast former US envoy to Israel, David Friedman, and Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador in Washington, ended his address with a message about the Jewish state. While Jews might protest for intense global scrutiny they are under, he said, his voice wavering, this little tiny people bears a tremendous moral responsibility in saving the world by example. Terrible example they're setting. God knows what could be done here if you were left alone, Peterson said, marveling at Israel's potential, especially in its technology. The fate of the world depends on the fate of the people of Israel. Make yourself a shining light on the hill. Peterson also urged Israelis to make peace with the Palestinians by making peace in their communities first. Confront the things you know to be true and say what you have to say, carefully but with love. If you can learn to bring peace to your house, then you can learn to bring peace to your community. And if you bring peace to your community, then you can make some headway in bringing peace to the world. But Jordan Peterson is, of course, a hypocrite, preaching stuff about like love and peace, and then sitting down to dinner with Netanyahu. So he posted this on his Instagram on the 10th of November, had about 200,000 likes. But literally go on this yourselves. I'm not making this up. I didn't edit this. Every single comment in order is actively turning against him. So here's one. How can you criticize Trudeau so hard, rightfully so, and not put any critique next to this post against Netanyahu? You should have stayed true to what you've said. You should uphold the morals you teach in front of everyone. A handshake that's stained with blood. With all the knowledge and intellect you possess, how do you fail to see the corruption and the evil they hold and gruesome vile acts they vomit against Palestinians? It's so sad to see you there. What the F, man? You lost a lot of people's respect. How come you haven't noticed anything wrong during your time there? Jordan Peterson is a good man. He's sitting with a wrong person. It's such a shame. How can a mind so great be so easily deceived? I'm glad these people are waking up. I genuinely believe Peterson is concerned about the flourishing of mankind against the repressive powers of tyranny, yet here he is in bed with a tyrant. So I'm glad a lot of people are waking up. This is unfortunate. I have always admired Dr. Jordan Peterson, but when it comes to supporting the killer of innocent Palestinians, this is a disgust. By Dr. JP, and thanks for the lessons, I am better off standing for what is right than standing for what is wrong. I recall you saying this in one of your lectures too. When you have the power of the world, it becomes your responsibility to wisely choose where you stand. This is a picture full of disappointment. Sorry, Peterson, our partnership ends here. And here comes the fall of Dr. Jordan Peterson. Again, these comments don't stop. Shaking hands with the devil will inevitably get you involved into innocent Palestinians' blood. Shame on your wisdom to be so blinded by their political propaganda. The hypocrisy of teaching moral principles to the youth when you can't let your morals prevent you from rejecting this invite. Total disappointment. So I'm not joking, go on that post, it literally does not end. And as you can see from a lot of those names, they are either Arabic names or they are names popular in like Islamic countries. So it's fairly reasonable to suggest that a lot of these people are Muslims who are strong supporters of Palestinians, but also Jordan Peterson fans. And of course, as you can see, a lot of them are saying, this is where we part ways. I'm not supporting you anymore. A lot of them are extremely disappointed in him because even though they may agree with either his self-help stuff, either they agree with his anti-left stuff and his pro-religious stuff, the Palestinian cause is still important to them. And of course, although it's disappointing to see so many, leaders of Islamic countries around the world have actually abandoned, their anti-Israel stance, it's still clear that so many of the Islamic countries' population still do take the Palestinian cause very, very seriously. Of course, motivated by religion as well, because some of the key sites in Islam are in Palestinian territory, but also because of solidarity with Muslims who are being oppressed by the Israelis. And if this is what it takes to wake up a lot of his Muslim fans, I'm happy they finally saw the hypocrisy of him preaching morality, of him preaching goodness and love and peace and all that stuff sometimes, and then sitting down and having a handshake with Netanyahu while Ben Shapiro smiles. It pretty much sums him up. He is someone who's always been on the far right, has always propped up this Western-dominated status quo, and it's pretty clear he doesn't really care about the apartheid and ethnic cleansing done by the Israeli government and Israeli settlers on the Palestinian people, with the firm backing of every powerful nation on earth, including obviously countries now that have jumped into bed with Israel, including Saudi Arabia and various Gulf states. And as we're going to get into, he mentions in this video we're going to watch in a sec, the Abraham Accords, which are a step to normalize relations between the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel, among others, like Morocco. But he's getting confused geopolitics with the genuine sentiment of various Muslim communities. The Israel stuff is more recent, but this message to Muslims happened months ago. A lot of you actually told me to cover it, and I think I actually included it in one of my videos about Jordan Peterson, but we're going to talk about it now. It's 6 minutes long. I'm not going to play you all of it. I'm going to play you select clips of it. Then I'm going to talk about it, and then we're going to get into the reaction from either his Muslim fans or just Muslim intellectuals.
And that the comments from the Muslim watchers and listeners to my YouTube channel and podcast have been so extraordinarily positive. And all this is lovely to see in the aftermath of the extraordinary Abraham Accords, which have laid out the possibility for peace between all the people of the book in an unprecedented manner. It is time for those of you in the Muslim world to stop fighting among yourselves, you Shiites and Sunnis, and also time to stop regarding the Christians, and even more specifically, the Jews, as your enemies, not least because you have the enemy located in the wrong place. Far more unites you with the other people of the book, as your own prophet himself, peace be unto him, forthrightly said, than what divides you. You are all threatened, in a very real sense, by the system of vengeful Luciferian ideas that currently confronts all that is transcendent, traditional, and valuable on the sexual front, on the familial front, on the conceptual front, on the psychological and sociological front. And I should also point out that it is not the individual carriers of the woke, politically correct, degenerate neo-Marxist ideas that should be regarded as the enemy either. Muslims, reach across the sectarian divide. Shiites, find a Sunni pen pal. Communicate with someone on the other side. Sunnis, do the same. And then, maybe, reach out, tentatively, to a Christian, or even, heaven forbid, a Jew. Because perhaps it is time for those who purport to be followers of God to act like it.
So obviously it's clear what Jordan Peterson was trying to do. He's basically saying, Muslims, you have more in common with Jews and Christians than you do with leftists. So can we all unite against the leftists who are attacking traditionalism, they're attacking sexuality and everything like that? The neo-Marxists are coming for you, Muslims, and we should all band together to fight them. But obviously, in doing this, he's actually offended loads of Muslims because what he's saying is insanely ignorant. He's basically characterizing every Muslim like they can't get along with anyone. He's talking about God forbid Sunni or Shiite, you reach out to a Jew. Like, Muslims and Jews have like never ever got along together. Not that they've grown up in like very close-knit communities. I was even reading a book about the lead up to the 1967 Arab-Israeli conflict, and there's literally like Israeli settlers living close by to Palestinians, and they get on and they're friends, right? Even in the context of this horrible apartheid state, there's still communities within Israel itself between Muslims and Israeli Jews that get on as well. And it's clear Jordan Peterson does not know anything about these. And of course, in places like New York, Jewish and Muslim communities get on fine. This is called a message to Muslims, right? It's not called a message to Muslims in Saudi Arabia and Iran, please get along with each other. It's literally Muslims everywhere. Muslims in Vietnam, Muslims in Cambodia, Muslims in Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Muslims in the UK, the US. You're all like this. You all hate each other, and you all hate Jews and Christians as well. Again, absolutely laughable understanding of the religious divides between these groups. And of course, yeah, there is differences between Sunnis and Shiites. You know, I talked about how I've been reading about medieval history. The break within Islam, the early split, did cause like insane violence, but also Sunnis would always fight each other. Just like with Christians, like Protestants fighting each other or Catholics fighting each other, just having the same religion doesn't paper over the cracks of geopolitics and things like that. And even having different religions also doesn't mean you hate each other. So for example, after the Ottoman Empire ended, Britain tried to create this country of Iraq by smashing together 3 Ottoman provinces, one Kurdish dominated, one Shiite dominated, and one Sunni dominated. And they all united together to fight the British because they didn't want to be ruled by another colonial power in the aftermath. And Shiite and Sunni fought alongside each other. This also happened against the American war in Iraq as well, where after they overthrew Saddam, there were Shiites and Sunnis fighting against the Americans together. Funny what Western colonialism can do for a bit of Arab-Muslim unity. And this, combined with the Israel stuff, has really, really burnt his credibility with a lot of his Muslim fans. But I want to get into the reaction to this as well and how it was received in both the Muslim world in general, but also among Jordan Peterson's Muslim fans. So she says, one previous fan wrote, if I had to choose 3 words to describe what I just saw, I would choose condescending, frustrating, and more importantly, disappointing. Another wrote, although the content of the lecture is mostly agreeable, it somehow strikes me as a Muslim as insulting, and I look up to Dr. Peterson as the best thinker of our century. However, I feel disappointed now. There are also political issues with the video. In delivering this message to his Muslim fans, Peterson stumbled upon a controversial topic, the normalization deals between Israel and the Arab regimes brokered by Donald Trump, known as the Abraham Accords. The Abraham Accords are not popular, to say the least, on the streets of many Muslim majority countries, and in choosing to build his message on this achievement without knowing what it means to the typical Muslim, Peterson snatches defeat from the jaws of victory. The Muslim Skeptic, a YouTube channel, also responded, and they started their video in response to this saying, I want to apologize because in the past I said that Muslims can benefit from Peterson's critiques of feminism and transgender ideology, but I take it all back. Don't take anything from this guy, he's pure poison. And the reasons, because as soon as Peterson finds out he has some Muslim following, what's the first thing he does? He puts out a message to Muslims that's pushing the Abrahamic Accords. Like I was saying at the start of the video, numerous Muslim majority countries' governments have sold out the Palestinians by making normalization deals with Israel, and that's what the Abraham Accords represented for governments like Bahrain and the UAE. But generally, like this article was saying, it's not popular with your average Muslim person. It's just their authoritarian, Western-backed governments doing this because they want to get into better relations with the Saudis, Israelis, and more importantly, the American backers they have as well are pressuring them to do this. Donald Trump, of course, and his government brokered this deal in the first place. So like I said, these authoritarian governments that often cause like fundamentalism to thrive and stuff also don't represent the general sentiment of many of their countrymen, because Palestinian and the Palestinian cause is always going to be important to your average Muslim growing up in these Middle Eastern countries. Framing the governments of Bahrain and Israel getting on better as, a sign that Muslims and Jews are getting on better, and that's the example you should follow, is pretty ridiculous considering, like I said, Muslims and Jewish communities get along fine in like New York, right? So why don't you talk about that? Why is it all about Middle Eastern geopolitics? So I want to read a couple of the YouTube comments that responded to his video and then just read a couple Muslim intellectuals responding to this, because I just don't want it to be about me responding to this, so let's get into this. In the comments saying, "Hi Jordan, I'm from Baghdad, Iraq, and I would like to tell you that Sunni and Shiites live together in Iraq peacefully. Some of our families contain a Sunni mother and a Shiite father, or vice versa. Some of my best lifelong friends are Christian, and I walked by a church last month and saw a priest saying goodbye to a smiling family leaving the church. Rest assured that the majority of Muslim people are peaceful and loving, but the actions of some bigoted minority sometimes, unfortunately, leave a stronger impression." So you are a subject matter expert and you have been an inspiration to me and to countless others. I listen to you very carefully and I am proud of you and all the hard work that you do. I am only asking that you do not stretch yourself too thin. Some topics such as Islam and the Muslim world, which I have experienced personally, I grew up in a Muslim country as a Christian, are simply too complex. Please tread carefully. Sunnis do not hate Shias. Islam does not hate Jews or Christians. I'm afraid that you might be falling victim to the same media that you are fighting against. There are a few radical fanatic extremists who I've encountered personally, just like any other group. Don't get trapped. So an article called "Response to Jordan Peterson's Message to Muslims. 5 Islamic thinkers weigh in on Jordan Peterson's recent video message to Muslims, calling it patronizing and tone deaf." So Sharif Abu Laif, research speaker and commentator, said, "Your latest video titled Message to Muslims frankly comes across as patronizing and ignorant about the contemporary status of the Muslim world. The problem isn't a conflict between or within religions. The conflict exists due to colonial and neo-colonial policies that have had a lasting impact on the Muslim world. So why is there anger? Not because of some problem within, but a broader problem of colonialism and the continued Western support for regimes like Israel while turning a blind eye to their oppression. Similarly, we see that Western states have helped create the current political regimes that reside in the Muslim world, like I was saying earlier. An easy example is Egypt, which receives military aid for maintaining a military business dictatorship, thus not allowing the people to choose the type of governance they want. The Egyptian military not only controls politics, but also the economy, media, and education. As such, anyone caught criticizing the military and its leadership faces imprisonment and potentially death. To reiterate, this is a military regime that has close ties with the West, as seen through military aid and economic ties. There are so many other examples. One last one is the current sectarianism that plagues Iraq. It primarily resulted from the West's invasion in 2003 and the resultant fallout that saw sectarian militias, some of who were directly supported by Western occupying forces, to police other sects and areas. If you want to see stability in the world and foster real engagement of Muslims, my request to you is to introspectively look at Western states' policies towards the Muslim world, not only over the last 130 years or so, but also the current political interference we see today. It's only by engaging in this honest introspection and holding powerful states like America to account for their actions in the Muslim world can we foster better understanding on both sides. So I like the point that person was making about, similar stuff to me, like colonialism has created these environments where there is sectarian conflict among various Muslim groups, and there are dictatorships which keep the population either ignorant or they have a control on things like education. So people inherently are going to stay fairly more conservative when it comes to more progressive ideals because they're not going to be exposed to them. They're not even going to learn about them because the state has a monopoly on information and stuff in places like Egypt, which are propped up by the West because it suits the West's geopolitical interest in the entire region. And that is what Jordan Peterson will never talk about because it goes against conservative ideology, because the conservatives think the West is the best. If you are allied with the West, that is all okay. So I don't think Jordan Peterson, as a conservative Western man, is going to challenge the status quo, which does create these very, very real sectarian clashes. And that is what colonialism has always done. Rwanda, obviously in India, places like Cambodia, Vietnam, places like China, like so many different African and Middle Eastern countries. The British and the French literally drew the map of the Middle East to divide up among themselves. Cannot talk about conflict within the Muslim world while ignoring, like that guy said, both historic colonialism and neo-colonialism that goes on today. So that is just an interesting case study of how Jordan Peterson's self-help stuff and more conservative politics has appealed to a lot of people in Muslim communities, but then he's alienating them as well by being insanely ignorant. Like in that video, he's trying to rally religious people to fight against woke, while at the same time showing complete ignorance of the very real problems within Muslim communities and basically characterizing them as all inherently very, very violent who just need white Western Christian man Jordan Peterson to tell them to write to their Shiite or Sunni pen pal and then everything will be fine. And, you know, if you could reach out to a Christian or Muslim, then everything will be fine. It just shows how Jordan Peterson loves to speak as an authority on things he doesn't understand. Like, if you know about any country in the region, it's really staggering he'd even make this video, because I'm even thinking about a country like Syria, which has like Muslims and Christians in its military, and like Assad's inner circle is like very, very diverse. And it just shows that in a lot of these countries, religion isn't as big a barrier to consolidate power like with Assad than he thinks it is. And in many countries, people just get on like normal. And of course, when you talk about Muslims, you're talking about like one of the most popular religions on the entire planet, which is pretty much in like nearly every single country. And like I said, American Muslims are actually pretty progressive compared to other religious groups in the United States. Muslim communities in New York get on fairly well with Jewish communities in New York as well. Like, are we going to talk about that? It's pretty clear there are plenty of Muslim communities that just get on fine with each other. Most Muslims just get on normal with each other, and they aren't all fighting each other over sectarian issues. That just happens in very, very volatile places, sometimes like Iraq in the last 20 years, because the sectarian tension has been stoked up by Western interference. Anyway, that is it for the video. The last video of me being 26, very fitting to finish it with Jordan Peterson. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I'll probably do a live stream at about midnight my time, the day this video goes up, just to, you know, birthday stuff, I don't know. Maybe I'll play some video games. But if you made it this far, thank you for watching.